So you had a rough childhood, Nathan. Your parents had some struggles. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so, I was always, from the day of my birth, I was back and forth with my grandparents. My mother and father were both on drugs, and it was a pretty bad situation. And, my mother and father, they would let my grandparents raise me for a little while, and me and my sister, and then they would want to have another chance and raise us. And so I would be back and forth between Pensacola and Louisiana. It was this crazy thing. And then finally, my grandparents gave my mother and father just one more shot at just raising us. They really, really wanted it to work. And, it wasn't even a month, I don't think. And my mother had gotten so bad on drugs that she had sold everything in our home for drug money. And that same night, I remember coming home and there being nothing in the house. And that very same night, she called my grandparents in Louisiana and said, "Hey, come get the kids or I'm just going to have to drop them off the police station." And that was, the night that I didn't see my mother nor my father again for, over a decade after that night. So it was a pretty rough thing. And then, my sister ended up passing away not too long after moving in with my grandparents full time from brain cancer. So it was just one thing right after another in my childhood, and it just kind of left, even though I didn't want to talk about it, there was a lot of deep hurt in my life, a lot of bitterness, a lot of unforgiveness that I had to deal with.
Yeah, I want to know what it's like for a kid to deal with that and live in that back and forth and probably desiring to have just a normal family.
Well, the back and forth, I don't remember too much, because I was so young, but, I do remember, moving in with my grandparents for the last and final time and, not having any contact with my mother and father. And that was, something I did think about, but at least I had my grandparents and at least I had my sister, but then when my sister ended up passing away, I remember I was at some family members' house and, they said, "Nathan, we need to take you back to your grandparents." And I was confused because I wasn't supposed to go back yet. I was going to be staying with them for a little while, and they said, "Well, we need to go back." And I'm like, "Why?" And they said, "Well, they'll tell you when you get there." And whenever I got there, they got me dressed because we were going to my sister's wake that day. So she had been in a coma for a while, and and I remember just standing in the mirror and asking myself, who am I? As a child, you're like, who am I gonna play with? Who am I gonna, who's gonna be there for me? And that was something that, it was such a traumatic event for me that some people react to trauma differently. Me, I'm a bottler. I just bottle it all up, and I don't want to let it out. It's only been recently, through music and through Christ that I've been able to release some of that. But my childhood, it was something that was, just a lot of things that it's hard to even really describe. It's something that you almost just have to go through to really get, and a lot of these feelings, as a child, a lot of these, thoughts that you have as a child don't manifest themselves until you're an adult. So that's something I'm dealing with my childhood now.
So here you are kind of, even though you had your grandparents, but alone. How does faith play a role in all of that?
Well, it's kind of one of those things. As a child, I didn't really understand. I wasn't mature in my faith yet. So I think a lot of those things, for my sister, with my sister passing away and the things that my parents had done to me and things like that, it kind of brought upon a little bit of rebellion in my life, and I rebelled against, my grandparents. So, at times when I was a teenager, especially. But I remember a lot of times during my childhood, feeling just numb to it a little bit. Feeling numb to it a little bit. I really was that person who just did not. I didn't want to tell anybody about what was going on in me. You know what I'm saying? It just wasn't in me. It's not in it. I can't stress enough, like it's only been recently that I've been able to really even open up. That's how I'm even able to talk to you about it. You know, years before, there's no way I could have sat down and told somebody this. I would have felt, it's almost just like this, I don't know how to explain it. You know, it's just this thing inside you that doesn't want to let it out. You know, you're afraid of what people might think about you. They may think you're weak. I think that was a big thing for me. I thought people might think I'm weak, you know, but you know, there were some times I definitely cried on my own by myself and thought things to myself, but I would just, you know, look from the outside, you wouldn't have thought anything was wrong. But
So when did Jesus enter the picture?
so Jesus entered the picture when I was 14 years old. I was going to church pretty faithfully. I hadn't been in church, you know, for a lot of my childhood, but my grandmother led the charge and she wanted to go back to church, so we did. And it just started off, you know, going Sunday and stuff like that. And then before I knew it, you know, I was going every Wednesday, every special event, every Sunday morning and night, you know, and sometimes I hated that. I didn't really want to go, you know, what child does really. Yeah. But my grandmother was, you know, insistent. It was a small little Southern Baptist church. And sometimes I'd be the only kid there for youth group kind of thing. But, you know, I went, and then, you know, our church had a special event where we took everybody in the church to another Baptist church right down the road, and they had a play going on called Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames, and it was a pretty awesome play. I mean, it was something that I could finally understand. And, you know, I had had the gospel presented to me over and over and over and over, but never depicted, you know, never visually. I'm a very visual person, I think. But I realized at that point that it's not just a good person who goes to heaven, because I'm here thinking like, you know, I'm good, you know, I'm a good person. You know, I really did think that, like, you know, I'm a Christian because my grandparents are Christians, you know, that type of thing. I think a lot of people have that attitude. But then I realized, you know, no one is good but God. You know, no one is good but God. And I realized that, you know, I didn't want to leave that night and not know where I was going, you know. And they did an invitation, you know, and it took everything in me, because again, I was really that person. I just couldn't, I didn't want people to think of me in a negative way, you know. And it was almost like this unwarranted feeling, because people probably never even really thought that about me. But I thought, man, people are going to think I'm weak because I'm this person and I need saving. Like, no, you know, but it took everything in me, and I knew the truth at that point, and I just couldn't deny it anymore. So with, you know, everything in me wanted to not go to the altar, but I just did it. You know, I just had to step out and do it, and, you know, prayed the prayer of salvation, and, you know, the rest is history, really. But, you know, that following day, I was actually able to tell my grandfather, you know, I got saved, you know, last night, which was so unusual for me. I was not the type of person to open up to him, especially, you know, and tell him something like that. But, you know, I wanted to tell somebody, and I remember it bringing, you know, it opened up a new chapter, I think, for our family, because then my grandfather started coming to church shortly after that. And he had been in church most of his life, but, you know, kind of backslid a little bit. And it really just got, you know, the whole family together and us going back to church. And, you know, my grandfather ended up becoming a deacon in the church, and he was so against going. He was so against going, and, you know.
And now you found this outlet through music.
Yeah, yeah.
And how did that outlet happen? How did you end up realizing that you could share some of that pain through music?
You know, I got deployed and stuff like that. Went to Kuwait and led
worship. You were in the National Guard?
Yeah, I was in the National Guard, so I went into the National Guard, and I ended up getting deployed. And, you know, I was a signal support specialist, but then this opportunity opened up for me to lead worship in the chapel there on base. So, like, I knew in my heart that that's what the Lord was calling me to. That's why I was there. And it was through that, just through people encouraging me, like, Nathan, like, you know, the songs you sing, your voice is so good, you know, and things like that. And I think, you know, people would always tell me, you have a gift, you know, you have an anointing on your life. And I would always, you know, really take that to heart, you know. And I finally just kind of, something broke in me to where I knew I needed to do something with this, you know, this gift that people kept saying I have, and this anointing that people said was on my life. I knew I needed to do something with that. But, you know, I would still resist God. I would still, like, it's just something I can never, like, pull myself towards, you know. I still resisted and resisted. But then it finally just, you know, broke in me. I got the opportunity to move to Nashville and get on tour after releasing an EP. And, you know, it was really through the guidance of a friend. He said, I finally confided my story in him, and he said, you know, Nathan, people need to hear this. You know, people need to hear your story. You know, there's so much more in you that you have yet to release.
Thank you for being honest and transparent, and I truly believe you will help people. Thanks again for your time, Nathan.
No problem.
The name of the album is Broken With You. Stay with us. We'll be right back.